everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever been frustrated that life's not going the way you'd like and would like to do something about it, then do we have the Angry Therapist Show for you. Today I'll be talking with John Kim, entrepreneur, blogger, therapist, and the author of a powerful new book, The Angry Therapist. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about how to find your authentic self and live your own truth. That plus we'll talk about buying strangers sandwiches, setting bowling shoes on fire, movie trailers and human notes, SUVs and tempurpedic pillows, what in the world's a model in a bottle, and what does Fred Durst, Kate Hudson, Japanese sushi, and Italian restaurants have to do with anything? So welcome to the show, John. Are you ready to shine?
I am, depending on your definition of what shine means today.
Well, to broadcast your authentic self to the world. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's shine.
Woohoo! So before we dive right into things, I've got to ask, how did you turn your parents, your family, their Italian restaurant into one of the hottest nightclubs around?
Oh, man. That feels like a different life. We had a little restaurant bar. So my parents came to America with, like $500, 2 kids. And my mom was working like at 7-Elevens and getting robbed, and she saved her money. My dad was working for a telephone company, and we bought a little hamburger shack. And then she did that for like 10 years. And then we ended up buying a Popeye's chicken, a Pioneer chicken, which turned into a Popeye's chicken in Long Beach. And then we sold that. She did that for another 10 years. And then we finally had enough money to buy this really cool little Italian restaurant that catered to the entertainment business in the post-production area in Hollywood. And the lunches were great. They were really busy. And whatever film came down that street, they all came in. So a lot of celebs and executives and all that. But at night, Hollywood was a very different time then. This is 2000, 2001, 2002. And no one came back at night because Hollywood was very, it was the hood. But I met a promoter, and he saw my place, and he was like, "Man, I could turn this into something." And I was like, "All right, sure, let's do it." So within like 4 months, I mean, we did some crazy things. Like we put grass inside, and we got a Shark Tank, and we had these white couches, and we made it look very scenic. And then it just blew up, and it turned into a very private, like an exclusive club, not like a dance club, but like a supper club. And I remember there were like 400 people waiting to get in, and about 50 people inside. And I just remember being in the middle of this craziness, and I was a vampire for about 3 or 4 years.
And how did vampireness end?
So P. Diddy came in, and this was when he was big, and he wanted to open till 4 a.m. Maybe I shouldn't say this. I don't know. I don't care. He wanted to open till 4 a.m. And in LA you have to close. You can't sell alcohol after 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. And me trying to be cool and fit in, I agreed to him, and we were already on the radar for like just fights and roofies and all these speculations, and so they were already hovering over us, Vice and police. And so they came in like at 3 a.m. and busted us. And after that, I was like, okay, I got to get out of this business. I got to sell this place. It's all my family had. And if I lost that, they would have been home. They would have been on the streets. So I got lucky. I sold it and managed to get out. And that's when I decided to become a therapist.
Awesome. So thanks for sharing. So backing up quite a bit from there, what was life like for you growing up, and what is K-Rage?
K-Rage, man, you did some homework. Something that I created. I called it Korean Rage, and I was I don't know how this came about, but when I was going through my rebirth post-divorce, I started joking about how K-Rage is a clinical disorder. Basically, if you're Korean, you have it. I grew up, in a middle class family. Parents are always at work, so I was raised more by pop culture. So I was breakdancing, skating, chasing girls, and all that stuff. And but I didn't get a lot of, and this is probably a cultural thing, but I didn't get a lot of space to be emotional. So like a lot of I love yous, a lot of how do you feel, a lot of those conversations. So it was very logic, like get good grades. Be successful, don't do drugs, all that kind of stuff. And so I don't know. I think that when we're younger and we don't have that, we're not given that kind of space. And it doesn't matter if you're Korean or whatever, whoever, whatever ethnicity you are. it could residue in anger. You know, you could grow up and you could be angry,
I
and
can,
so yeah, I just K rage is the result of that.
the result
People,
of stuffing your emotions for 20 years.
yeah, exactly right. And then suddenly you're 20 and you're furious, throwing chairs and shit.
Oh my. So how did you go from there to screenwriting?
I went to so in college my degree was film,
Mhm.
and I've always loved writing and I've always loved movies, and I wrote a script about the club business and I got representation, and then I remember from that getting meetings, and then I sold a couple projects. I sold a movie to HBO and stuff, but I it was too feast or famine, and it just wasn't for me. And I remember the lows were really low and the highs were extremely high, and it wasn't sustainable. It didn't make me happy.
That makes sense. So going from there, I almost hate to ask about this, but what was Model in a Bottle?
Oh, that's so model on the bottom. This is when the internet stuff was happening, when it was very new, and they were just starting to stream. This was before Tyra Banks, uh, her famous show Top Model,
Hmm.
and so my ex-wife was a actress model, and all of her friends were models, and I thought that business and those people, I thought it was very interesting and very it was just a world that not a lot of people had to look into. And so the way I met my promoter is I got some funding, and we rented a penthouse by the Sunset area in Hollywood, and it was $1 million penthouse, and I had 6 or 7 models, just friends, living there, and they could live there for free. In exchange, we had webcams, and we were documenting their lives, and I called it Model in the Bottle, and it was basically kind of like Tyra Banks' show, where you get a deep look into the models' lives and their castings and what they go through. And everyone in the building thought I was literally like a pimp, and that those were prostitutes. And and the way I met my promoter was he lived there,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and so he was like, "Who's this guy, and what is he doing with like these women in this penthouse?" And that's how I met the promoter. And then he found out that it was like a legit, so it was like a web show. It was too early. The it wasn't like broadband. Everyone was static. The girls were never home because they're out. Of course, I didn't think about that. So you would log in and you would basically just see an empty penthouse. So
Lots of learnings with that one.
lots of learning. I was in my 20s, and yeah, it was fun.
All right, so let's fast forward from there and talk about khakis and dark blue polos.
Oh, shit. Yeah, that's the so my definition of being a therapist was, like Dr. Drew, it was the shirt and tie, the private office with the silver ball going back and forth, and a latte. You roll up in your European sedan, and life had a different path for me. So I ended up working in nonprofit residential, treating teens with addiction.
Hmm.
And so I almost became like a camp counselor, where they had a uniform, it was khakis and a blue polo. And I remember, I was in my 30s, got my master's, did all these hours, and I just felt like, what am I doing? This doesn't match my blueprint of what a therapist looks like. But that is where I learned the most about helping people.
Now, it's pretty cool because it sounds like for 5 years you were treating teenagers for substance abuse, but in a sense, they were also treating you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a system called TC, which is called Therapeutic Community, and it's residential, so the kids were living there. And through their engagement in helping them, I actually grew and learned a lot about myself, and just the presence of a male, and meeting their parents, doing tons of groups, and yeah, it was the birthplace of what we're doing now with Shift and Tribes, in that you're not meant to do life alone. And I discovered the power of community.
Awesome. From there, it sounds like you had a divorce at that point, and this may
Yeah,
have been a big shift, in a sense, a positive shift for you. What was coming out of that?
yeah. Got married young, so yeah, we got a divorce, and then the thing about divorce is it makes you shake your life etch a sketch, and you could start all over. And of course, at the time, it was terrifying. And I know you mentioned tempurpedic pillow, because I always tell people I left with nothing except a really nice pillow. She got the bed, but the beauty is, when you start all over, it's an opportunity to completely reinvent yourself, from who you surround yourself with, how you think, what kind of person you want to be. And so I started with nothing. I started with, I don't even think I had a job at the time. I had no friends. I just went on Craigslist and found a roommate, and that was my life. And
A
my
Greg
parents,
mate?
Greg mate, yeah. And his name was Greg, yeah. That was interesting. And then my parents, they bought me a little laptop when those little white MacBooks were very in,
Hmm.
and that's when I just decided to create a blog. And Tumblr was new at the time, and I called it the Angry Therapist.
And how did that start to do?
It was interesting because I never meant it to be anything other than for me to start expressing myself, for the first time in my life, and just kind of document my journey. And my very first post was called "My Feelings," and that kind of set the tone for everything. And I think what was interesting was because I was a therapist, or a therapist in training, to pull the curtain back, and therapists are supposed to be neutral; they're not supposed to talk about themselves. And here I was saying that I'm not only a therapist, but I'm also hurting. I'm going through a divorce, and this is what it looks like. I also documented, me getting my first motorcycle and tattoos and finding CrossFit. And I think people related to me. I think what I didn't know this at the time, was I humanized myself.
And what did that? It's interesting because I have a blog, a newsletter, all this stuff, and I was thinking about your emotional connection to your
Mm.
listeners, and it sounds like you must have been raw, completely putting
Yeah,
yourself out there.
yeah. I made a decision. I tell people, I'm just your average John who made a decision to be honest one day. And I decided to be honest. And what that looked like was just complete transparency. And yeah, the word you use is raw. I was definitely very raw at the time. And I didn't have anything, so I had nothing to lose. You know what I'm saying? And what was interesting was I still had the clinical route where I was working in treatment centers and doing the whole therapist thing,
Hmm.
and I felt like I was pushing a mail cart. Then when I came home and I was on the Angry Therapist, being completely authentic, which is the theme today, I felt like I was wearing a cape. And I noticed that, and I was like, you know what, feels right to me, although it's a little bit terrifying and weird, and people don't know what this is. I'm going to go with this, and that's what turned into everything I'm doing now. I mean, I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for that little blog.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
What's really cool, something you just said, if we back up a few sentences, and go on back, is you said, I had nothing to lose.
Mm.
That lack of attachment is powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people get stuck because they feel like they have so much to lose. So whether it's friends, kids, marriage, whatever it is, they hold on to things and they don't allow them to stretch because they're afraid they're going to lose things. Um, I had nothing to lose, so it's like let's start swimming that way and see what happens.
Awesome. So I want to talk about some of the ideas that you have in the book. I think they're really powerful. And the first one I want to start with has a fun name to it. What does John Kimming something mean?
Oh, it means that I'm a C student. So in high school, my SAT scores were so low that the vice principal called me down and asked me if everything was okay at home. And I don't know if he would have said that if I wasn't Asian, but I was the guy, ditching class, going surfing, and all this kind of stuff. And so I was always a C student, but I was always very right brain. So I was very creative, very visual. I'd be a daydreamer in science class, looking out the window, wondering if I could fly, that kind of stuff. But I just didn't do well in exams. I was a C student. So in order for me to understand something, I call it John Kimming it, or putting it in a shot glass, or very simplifying it. And what kind of I noticed what works is that it works when it comes to something dense like psychology or self-help, where there's a lot of theories and stuff. And so when I John Kim it, I just try to strip out all the fat and bring it to the simplest terms. And so when you're a blogger, or when people are reading you, that's really beneficial. People, respond to potent little simplified concepts.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You talk about growth and you say it has to be sustainable. What does that mean?
I think that I think growth is a lifestyle. I think a lot of people, it's like the yo-yo diet, where people go on a diet and they go extreme and they get some success, and then, it's just not sustainable. Then they go back to their regular life, and then they, gain more weight. I think growth is the same way. Working on yourself, self-awareness, it has to be threaded into your life, and then it doesn't feel like work. It's just living. And so as you live, you grow. We're evolving creatures.
Thank you. You say your job is to help build containers. What's that
Yeah,
mean?
I really believe that it's all about our container, our life space. Most of us have cracked containers due to everything that's happened before, our beliefs, abusive relationships, all childhood, all that. But I believe, and this is how I grew after my divorce, is I built myself a brand new container, and I helped the kids build themselves a brand new container. And by doing so, I think growth is organic. When you create that safe space for yourself, whether we're talking about non-negotiables or boundaries or whatever, um, that is like it's like a greenhouse where you could then you can then grow and thrive.
Awesome. And on that line, in fact, if we go back talking about growing and thriving and Superman capes, you say everything starts with how you feel. It's the birthplace of change.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's the soil for anything. So here's the thing, if you can't be honest, and I mean honest with yourself as well as with others, there's nothing to build on. So I think truth is the first building block. So whether you're honest about your recovery, or you're honest about where you're at in your life, or the way you think, or whatever, your weight, your depression, whatever it is, you have to start with your truth. You have to start by expressing what it is. And most people don't, because they are not wired to. For many people, especially people that have helped, it's so hard for them to express themselves. It sounds simple, but it's just not a muscle that they're used to exercising.
How did you, with your background and your childhood growing up, where we talked about this very, very briefly off air, because my wife is Chinese and she experienced this
Hmm.
growing up as well, where culturally feelings weren't really what was discussed.
Yeah,
The day-to-day
yeah.
stuff was.
Yeah, I've never heard my parents say, and I still haven't to this day, I am sad, I am whatever I am, or any kind of feeling statement. It's, and I'm sure, from their parents, they never learned it, and it's generational. But, and maybe today with our generation, especially in the Asian culture, we're creating more spaces for that. I definitely will, if or when I become a parent. But, I think it affects us, and I think that because of that, when it comes to expressing ourselves in relationships, or, in anything the rest of our lives, we keep it inside, or we don't, it's not important, or we shut that down, and we're suddenly just very logic driven.
So how do you then start to strengthen? How did you personally start to strengthen? Was it the blog? Was it prior to the blog screenwriting to get that muscle going to emote, to express yourself?
It was seeing a therapist myself, and getting that muscle going a little bit, but wasn't until I started being a therapist where, because there's something safe about being behind your computer, and I think that's why people blog so much. And I didn't see that it was being broadcast to the world. I just saw it as my computer, as my diary. And so, just practicing transparency and vulnerability in that space was huge. That's how I did it. Is I did that, and then I became more and more. I went from blogging to videos, getting really uncomfortable, being embarrassed, wanting to delete. I went through all that, and I still do it today. But now I've swam too far where I can't turn back, where it's like, I don't really care. This is who I am. But it took years to do that. It wasn't like I just woke up and suddenly I was fearless.
It's interesting. We're I don't know 540 shows in, a daily show every single day, and I'm quite comfortable behind the mic. But if you put me on, what is it, Periscope or Snapchat or something where it's
Yeah,
instant
yeah,
and out there to the world, I think I'd be like deer in headlights.
yeah, yeah. It's a whole thing with, like, public speaking, and the fear that we have.
So you mentioned a keyword a minute or two ago that I want to double back to. What do you define as transparency, and why is it so important?
Transparency is what we're talking about. It's about the being honest, not only with others but yourself. It's about showing yourself. So under that umbrella, that includes talking about your feelings, your state, self-expression. Not leaving people that care about you in the dark.
So and when you talk about it showing yourself, what's the importance then of self-awareness in this process?
Yeah, of course. You can't show yourself if you're not aware of how you are, how you feel, and it's this idea of living inside out instead of outside in. I think a lot of us, um, we hold our feelings in, and we go through the world based on external things. So advertising, society, other people's blueprints, what's cool, whatever. And by doing that, we become shelves. When we live inside out,
Mhm.
we are then more like a prism and letting light to shine through us, and then we become more at our potential, more authentic, more who we're supposed to be. So a good example of this is when I was running the club.
Yeah.
I was living very outside in, so it was very veneer, very Hollywood, very the beautiful people and all that. But it was a facade, and I was exchanging my truth for membership. Once I became a therapist and I started from scratch, then I was living inside out. I was then talking about my feelings. This is who I am, and by doing so, that process is really empowering.
It's really cool because that violates at least all of the unspoken rules about the counselor who is supposed to have that
Right.
veneer, that facade be the wall.
Yeah, and I think that was what's kind of controversial, and I think topical today, especially with the explosion of life coaches. The therapists can show themselves now. I mean, in school we're taught not to, and I think that creates a disconnect.
What's the importance of accepting our own story?
Oh, yeah. I think most people want to rip out chapters because there's a lot of shame and guilt, and also there's a lot of things that happen to us that we had no control over, right? And so because of that, we want to rip those chapters out. And I think in order to really own and move forward, you have to accept your story. You have to accept everything that's happened, good or bad, and that is yours, and no one can take your story away. And there's a tipping point where you not only accept it and embrace it, but you start to share it. And when you share your story, that's when your story becomes bigger than you, and that's when it's not even about you anymore. That's where the most power is.
When it comes to giving, to serving, to
Right.
helping others.
Absolutely. To being a point in someone's life, a catalyst.
Awesome. If we go back to starting to, you were talking about the importance of living inside out rather than outside in, if I get that right. How do people who are, they're listening to the show and they're going, I want to do that, but I don't even know how or what that feels like.
Mm.
Where do they start?
I talk a lot about your pseudo and solid self. And if you've seen Fight Club, there's Edward Norton and Brad Pitt, and just a spoiler alert that at the end you find out that it's one person. It's about inner conflict. Edward Norton was very pseudo. He's a false version of who he really was. He was just drifting around like a leaf and buying IKEA furniture and insomnia and all that. And then he meets Brad Pitt, and Brad Pitt is his solid side. That's his true self. And because of Brad Pitt, he finds purpose. I mean, I know they start fighting and stuff, but he finds love. He finds his voice. He becomes a leader. And I think I really love the metaphors in that movie because I think it's how we are. We all have a pseudo and solid self. So if you want to start pulling from your solid, if you want to be authentic, if you want to practice transparency, you have to start pulling from your solid self. And it changes throughout the day. So like depending who we're around, you may be very solid around your kids, but at work in front of your boss, you're very pseudo. And when you know that know that you're powerless, not power filled. And so you have to turn that dial and ask yourself what it would look like to be more solid, to pull from your truth, and then execute that, and then do it more and more like a muscle and build it.
I like that. With that said, when we're talking about pseudo self and true self, you have a beautiful example from in your counseling career when you're put on the spot and you end up taking this group, I believe, and talk about one exercise with movie trailers, a second with human knots, and it perfectly displays the difference between true and not true.
Yeah, I was working at an eating disorder treatment center, and it was run very by the book. And I just love being creative. So I remember doing an exercise that I thought a therapist should do, and it fell flat. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to do something that John Kim would do. And I asked them to, I did the movie trailer exercise where I asked them to play their story so far in their life as a movie trailer, and they could do it however they want, whatever genre. And that was a great intervention, and it led to a great group. And it was just proof that, that's me pulling from my solid self instead of fear, instead of being pseudo, instead of, walking with a lot of shoulds and what a therapist should do,
Very cool. And that exercise itself, it kind of gets into the idea of looking at, you talk about a string of your life. Maybe you can share what the importance of that is.
Yeah, I think, when we get stuck, I think it's great to pull back and see our entire story. I think a lot of people, we don't do that. And also to make sense of it, and to connect dots. I think Steve Jobs says you can't connect dots unless you're looking back. But if you pull back and you see that whatever you're going through is only one chapter or maybe even one page, you have less anxiety and more understanding and hope that there's more to your journey than just what's happening right now. It's like when we were in high school, like everything is life or death, right? And looking back, it was just high school, it was just prom. But the day that she said no to you when you asked her to prom, or the day that whatever, it was like the sky was falling. And if you really pull back, like high school, looking back now, it was such a small part of our life, and whatever you're going through now, that's going to be a small part of a bigger picture.
That makes sense. In fact, on those terms, you talk about something, an important practice of asking, what if I died tomorrow?
Yeah. What if I died tomorrow? And I think it has to do with this turning of dials of, I talk a lot about turning dials because I'm visual, and I like this idea that you're turning a dial in your head from how I want to be perceived to how I want to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
So from seeking approval and validation to being authentic and people remembering me because I was me, not because I was trying to be someone else.
And on those lines, there was a gentleman you sat next to, you had a sandwich next to, and you had a dilemma, what to do in that moment, and you chose the you path, and I think you went and got another sandwich.
Yeah, I remember this. Wow, this is great. I think I bought him a sandwich.
Yeah.
Right, I bought him a sandwich, and there was a sense of me at the time where I felt like, ignore this guy. He's homeless or whatever he was. I judged him, and I decided that that's not my truth. Pull from your solid self, and I ended up buying him a sandwich and having a great engagement with him, and leaving feeling proud that I did something that I felt was authentic and honest, and coming from a giving place instead of a taking place.
It's awesome because I can hear the dilemma in your head, which is this could be really embarrassing if I give the guy a sandwich and he feels
Yeah.
insulted about it, but my heart or my gut is telling me it's the right thing to do.
Right, and I didn't know if he was just a guy hanging out or if he was home. I didn't know. So yeah, you're right. If I ever bought him a sandwich, he would have been insulted because that would be me assuming that he can't afford one. It was just listening to my heart, and it was something I wasn't used to. And so in normal, that's not very me. In normal situation, I wouldn't have done anything. I wouldn't have bought anyone a sandwich. I would have just ate my lunch and left. But it was a lot of listening to to my little voice in instances like that where I had revelations where this is the path to take.
How is it moments like this that have helped cultivate it, or how have you trained? It's so hard in today's society. We're bombarded to get from up here in the head to back down to the heart.
Yeah, yeah. I think that a lot of people don't allow them, going back to the feeling, they don't allow them to feel something. Our logic is kind of how we maneuver, and so if it doesn't seem logical, we don't connect with our feelings. Even like connecting with our bodies and all that. It's very outside of ourselves.
There's a few really, really, really cool lines in the book. One is, the more you prove your old self wrong, the more you will shed your old beliefs and create new ones.
Yeah, I like this idea of proving yourself wrong. I know it sounds kind of weird, but it's because most people have false beliefs. Most people believe they can't, or they're not good enough, or strong enough, or pretty enough, or whatever. And once you start proving yourself wrong through experience, because I think there's nothing more convincing than experience, then that's when there's a shift. That's when you start forming new beliefs.
And on the shift side of things, the next one you say is, growth is 50% revelation and 50% execution. Without the
Yeah.
execution, all you have is ideas, not change.
Yeah, I think most people are interested in growth. They're curious about it. They read about it. They digest a lot of content. They listen to podcasts. They read books. But then it stops there. And if you don't execute it, it's like going to the gym. You could read about programming and all this kind of stuff, but if you don't actually get your butt in the gym and start lifting weights or running or doing whatever, moving, you're not going to see any results. And growth is the same way. You have to execute your revelations, or they're just ideas.
So when people are listening to the show, they have to actually do something after they
Yes.
listen to it. This isn't the doing.
this isn't the doing. This is the beginning. This is the first domino, but I think the doing is then threading your revelations into your life. I mean, if you realize that you are, say, attracted to a certain type and that leads to dysfunctional relationships, exercising that means to start drawing lines or boundaries or, making an effort to not engage in that. So that's the action piece.
Awesome. On that note, there's a powerful practice you have in this book, and that I think we all could use putting more of in our lives. What's the practice of gratitude mean to you?
I think gratitude, just because it's such a big wellness buzzword now, is thrown around a lot. But I think, like a muscle, I think it's something that a lot of people think about and they do it for a second, but they don't live gratitude. I think gratitude is a practice, like meditation. I don't think it's just something that you do once and you're like, all right, I'm great. I'm a grateful person. I practiced gratitude for 10 minutes. I think it's something that you thread into your life, like everything else. Like it's something that you are conscious of and that you are continually trying to practice as much as you can. And I think the more you do it, the stronger you are at it.
What does it mean to anchor or to bring all your senses into an activity?
Yeah, I think I'm interested in people's states. I'm interested in flow states, and I think one way to anchor is to one way to feel the world is to use all our senses. We usually just use our brain and our thoughts, but when we use all our senses is how we kind of come into the present. It's a powerful way to do that, and that's how you anchor yourself. When you feel yourself drifting, to be completely aware of what you see, what you smell, what you feel, what you taste, what you touch, everything. And I think that it'll turn you three-dimensional again, instead of a cardboard cutout.
Awesome. You like something out of Thich Nhat Hanh that I really enjoyed myself. It's the process of washing dishes as a mindfulness
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. I don't know why I like that so much. I enjoy like putting on the dishing gloves, washing the dishes, and maybe it's the hot water that goes through, or the cleansing of the plates. I don't know, but I kind of space out and I think about things while I'm doing the dishes, and I actually enjoy the dishes. There's a
Awesome.
move. There's a romantic comedy I think with Jennifer Aniston where she's like, "I don't want you to do the dishes. I want you to want to do the dishes." And I remember in the audience thinking, "I actually want to do the dishes." Yeah.
So, well, there's something also, at least for myself, of not having the dishes there, of the spaciousness, the emptiness, the order that comes out of the dishes being done.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's all of that.
So on that note, as long as we're talking briefly about being here and now, would you say that the problems that we create in our mind are created because we're not anchoring ourselves in the present moment?
100%. I think, including myself, and it's a struggle, but I think we live in time machines. I think we are either replaying the past or we are obsessing about the future. I think we maneuver, with worry and dread and fear and all that stuff prevents us from being present and being in the now. We were talking earlier about public speaking. All that is not being present, but it's about thinking about what other people think of you, what's going to go wrong, what wrong, and so it definitely allows fear to creep in. And I
So,
think when you're afraid, you're not able to be present.
oh, absolutely. And on that note, also, when you're afraid, it's because you have an attachment to something in the past, in the future. What does it mean then to set your bowling shoes on fire?
Oh, to return your bowling shoes. It means that there are things that we carry that we need to return, like bowling shoes. So, example is the blueprints that our parents have for us. Things that happen in relationships, anger, resentment. There's stuff that we carry that don't belong to us that we need to return, or they just become stones in our shoes, and we start walking funny.
Ouch. What is your stance? You can't really do that with a stone in your shoe. What's a good stance?
When I talk about stance, I talk about like that's the second part of building yourself a brand new container, and it's having part of having a stance is having firm non-negotiables. I think that we negotiate a lot, especially when it comes to relationships. I think when love or matters of the heart hit, logic goes out the window, and we start negotiating things about ourselves that we like. And so going back to having a strong stance is creating a lot of non-negotiables that you hold with two hands. And there's a difference between non-negotiables and preferences. So I'm not talking about preferences. I'm just talking about things, big things that you're not willing to negotiate.
What would be, if you don't mind sharing, an example or two of a
Sure.
non-negotiable for you?
Yeah, so like an obvious one would be for me would be no character assassination. So if I'm in a relationship where someone's assassinating my character, and I'm not just saying once, I mean, we talk about it, but if there's no effort to change that,
Mhm.
that's not something I'm willing to negotiate. But there's also other things like good banter, and the importance of that that I'm not willing to negotiate. On the other hand, preference is like, if a woman says I will only date someone who's 6'2", makes six figures, with blue eyes and abs, that's obviously that's being narrow. That's not that's not a non-negotiable.
That makes sense. You say men walk with mirrors and boys do not. What's that mean?
Yeah, I think the greatest difference between men and boys is that boys react and men respond. And in order to respond, you have to have the ability to look at yourself. And that's what I mean by walking with mirrors. I don't mean check your hair. I mean looking at yourself. And I really think that's the biggest difference. And I was reactive most of my life until, my late 30s when I think I became a man. And that's when I started to respond and not react to everything.
Awesome. You're in really good shape. You look like you work out CrossFit a ton. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But you
Sure.
have a fun habit that I really think is taking care of your psyche, which is F it Fridays.
Oh, Good Fridays. You know how that happened was I was when I was working in the treatment center. It's like everything revolves around food because we're so exhausted trying to help people that when we get our enjoyment, our nectar out of things like donuts. And every Friday, I would make it a point to allow myself to eat something really bad, and that's how it started. And then I would start posting something, and I would just label it Good Friday, and that's how it became my little thing. But it
Uh,
doesn't have to be food. Now it's like now I think we should all have one it every Friday. Maybe it's leaving work early. Maybe it's a donut. Maybe it's buying yourself something. It doesn't have to just be food related.
I like that. I think that's taking care of your soul.
Absolutely, absolutely, and not being so hard on yourself.
How important is that?
I think it's everything. I think it's the pressure that we put on ourselves and then the judgment behind that. I don't think allows us to expand. It constricts us.
So I want to jump into containers a little bit more here. And you say when you don't make it about you, the universe will.
Yeah, this is something I've learned just through life, and I know it kind of sounds very Bruce Lee-ish, but um, whenever I make things about me, the world gets very small, and I end up falling off giant cliffs that I created built on expectation. Whenever I make it about someone else,
Mhm.
you start living a through me life. So, instead of a to me or a by me life where there's big ego, you start living a life where your ego is small, and then the whatever you want to call the higher power, the universe, aliens, whatever you believe in, those forces work through you, and I think that's when you soar, and I think that's when you start running toward purpose and where you're meant to go is when allowing yourself to be allowing things to be bigger than yourself and what your needs are.
Awesome. And for that, we really need to both be present and we need to, I would say, go quiet on the inside. So can you tell me your opinion of meditation and where your triumph fits into this puzzle?
Yeah, so meditation has been very difficult for me. Me and meditation, we just don't get along. I'm very high strung. I'm an Aries. I'm very passionate, and I can't sit still. I never have been. This is why I can't do yoga, but it's also why I'm attracted to CrossFit, right? Because it's very explosive. So I started meditating, and it's just always been difficult. But I found that when I'm on my motorcycle and I'm hugging canyons or I'm on PCH, which is Pacific Coast Highway, or by the beach, um, you have to be fully present or you're going to die.
Mhm.
And so it forces you to be in this state of just complete presence. And you notice trees, you notice wind, you notice everything. And it's like the world brightens. And it's like, to me, for me, it's a very fast way to get into a meditative state. Is on your motorcycle, which sounds very dangerous because people are like, "What are you doing meditating on your motorcycle?"
Well, you have to be, and I've been a writer almost my whole life, and and I'm itching, and particularly reading your book, going to your website, seeing you getting on or off your motorcycle, and I'm going, oh, it's time, it's time, it's time,
Yeah,
but I'm waiting till I'm away from the city. I guess that's an excuse,
yeah,
but I'm going to stick with that, and my wife is very thankful for that.
sure, sure, absolutely.
But it's like to me, when you're on a motorcycle, you're like a pilot. You're just at ground level.
Yeah.
You just have to pay just as much attention to everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that can get you into you could meditate, you know. You're focusing on your breathing and being super present and not in your head, not in your thoughts.
Awesome. Let's talk about CrossFit for just a brief minute because it
Sure.
sounds like you were maybe like me, not exactly the first kid picked for the teams growing
Hmm.
up.
Yep. I mean, I wasn't like picked on or bullied. I was very lucky in that I grew up in the '80s, and there weren't in my world there wasn't a lot of Asian kids. Um, but every cool clique allowed one Asian kid to be kind of cool, and I ended up just being lucky being that one guy.
Very
But
cool.
when it came to sports, I wasn't I was I was on the football team, but I never played. So I was the guy with the whitest uniform. I was the bench warmer. 3 seconds left in the game. It's like get John Kim in there, and then the bell rings before I even do anything. So because of that, I had this false belief that I wasn't an athlete. And so when I found CrossFit, although I was okay at it, because of my false belief, there was a mental stutter. And when I went, CrossFit attracts a lot of athletes and MMA fighters and SWAT and firefighters, a lot of athletic guys. So I had that mental block, and I had that mental block, that false belief, and it wasn't until I dissolved that where I actually then started to, do just as well as them or even beat them.
How did you start to dissolve that belief?
Experience. The day that I actually did tie someone or beat someone that was quote unquote an athlete or was on the first string in their football days, that's when your belief changes. That's when you start saying, "Oh, what if? Well, maybe I am." That when you start questioning yourself, this is what I'm talking about. When you start proving yourself wrong, then you start to believe different things. And then when you keep having more of those experiences, you keep cementing those beliefs.
This is going to sound really strange, but in a strange way, I don't know how to put it. Is it a goal then to try to prove yourself belong or wrong or break down your limiting beliefs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that should always be a goal, is to constantly try to break down limiting beliefs and constantly try to prove yourself wrong, in what you can do and what you can't, and all that.
Awesome. Let's talk real briefly about passion. And I love how you put this. You say passion isn't found, it's forged.
Yeah, I think a lot of times passion people that want to find passion, they're searching. I think it's again. I think it's like a practice. I think it's like going. What we're talking about threading growth and wellness and being a better version of you into your life. I think it's forged. I think it's something that it requires attention and grooming and watering, and it grows. Like anything else, the more you feed it, the more it grows. I don't
So,
think it's a light switch. I don't think it's something you just find under a rock.
well, that's important because I think there are a lot of people looking and say, when I find my passion,
You're right.
but it's really an exploration, even a journey.
Absolutely. And I think your passion can change. So it's not just one thing. As you change, your passions change.
Yeah, well, you went.
So it's more about creating a space for it to happen.
Well, it's beautiful. You went from a screenwriting passion to a pimping passion,
Right, exactly.
to and you just keep reinventing yourself.
Yeah, you know what I do, and this is again going back to my whole thing of just standing on your truth. Whatever feels honest to me, I feed and I lean into, and that ends up taking me on a ride, on an adventure. So at the time it was the club, and then it was model in the bottle, and then it was therapy, and now it's about throwing the biggest net I can, and also changing the way we change through shift and also the temperature, like the new definition of what a therapist looks like.
Tell us briefly then, what is Shift? Where can people go to find out more? And what's your app?
Yeah, so shift is it's SHFT without the I, because we're taking the I out of self help. It's shift.us, and it's basically this idea of running tribes. So you jump into a tribe based on whatever you want to work on. If it's self love or relationships or whatever, and you do it with about 12 other people, led by a life coach we call Catalyst. And so you don't have to do it alone. And I think it's the power in group work. It's what I discovered when I was working with kids at TC, is that when you start colliding and working and sharing your story with other people, that growth is more exponential than if you're by yourself trying to do something.
Awesome. What advice would you give? You're not a parent yet. I think you have that in as one of your non-negotiables in the book, that you want to be a great dad someday.
I do, man, but I'm getting older, so I don't know. My clock is ticking. But I'm also open to
Isn't that a limiting belief?
it's a total false belief, absolutely. And that I need to prove myself wrong by, I guess, getting someone pregnant.
So on that note, advice you'd give for parents today for their kids?
Oh man. Let's tie this whole thing back together of how it started. Create a space to allow them to feel, to express themselves, something I didn't get, something your wife probably didn't get, and a lot of people didn't get. And because of that, there's a lot of consequences growing up that roll into relationships, all relationships. And so I think it's so important as a parent to create a space for your kids to just be them and express themselves and start exercising that muscle young.
Awesome. A few quick wrap-up questions. First off, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Oh, wow. There's so much. Before, I think in my 20s, it used to be things, I want things, and, I love machines like vehicles and all that. Today, it's going to be experiences. Mm-hmm. So that could come in the form of, an amazing long motorcycle ride, or it could come through sex, or it could come through the dopamine from falling in love or being attracted to someone, or, when someone kisses you back. So I'm interested in moments. I'm interested in experiences more than I am, the Porsche or the house or all that stuff. Not that I don't want those things either, but I put more weight and value in experiences and affecting people, our collisions that we have.
I couldn't agree more, although I've never used the word collision for it.
Yeah, I believe we collide. And I don't think, when people say collisions, I feel like it seems like it's negative, and I don't see it that way. I see it as that we collide, and from our exchange, from our collisions, we both change, even in this interview. Your energy, your humor, your interviewing me is impacting me in some way, and I'm doing the same. And so when after our collision, we are, we change in some way, no matter how small or how big.
And I would say that's a woohoo, a beautiful collision, John.
Yeah.
On that note, any last words of wisdom that you want to share with people today?
Words of wisdom. Man, I would say, so I have this thing tattooed on my forearm, and I was really embarrassed when I first got it, but now I enjoy it. And it says, resist nothing.
Yes.
I really believe that resistance is where we have the richest soil to grow, And if we look and lean into our resistance and wonder why we're resisting that, we can really change in those moments.
So where we find something we're resisting, step back, lean in.
Yeah. Don't resist it. See what happens. Be curious.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John, for being on the show. This has
Thank
been
you.
A lot of fun. I love your book. It was really fun. I think following your blog would be quite enjoyable as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Book comes out in April, so I really thank you for reading it. It means a lot.
Awesome. And one more time on the link then?
One more time on the what?
The link to get your book.
Oh, the link. theangrytherapist.com, or you can go to shft.us.
Fantastic. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the Angry Therapist, and start living your authentic life and shine bright. Woohoo!
I love the woohoo.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun, John.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I love your energy, and I can't believe you did 500 of these so far?
This is number 540.
That is amazing, man. Good for you. Wow, you do them every day.
Every single day, a book a day.
How do you do so many?
I can use therapy. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like. comment, subscribe, see the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!